Oh boy, I heard a lot of people talk about Immaculate in the past 2 weeks, and now we have another religious horror movie dealing with babies and pregnancy. Oh my. The First Omen stars Nell Tiger free and is about a young American woman is sent to Rome to begin a life of service to the church, but encounters a darkness that causes her to question her faith. This movie, the original Omen, released in 1976, is a classic. I've never reviewed this movie. I actually want to review this movie one day, maybe during Halloween, but this is a classic. And when I heard they were making a prequel, I was like, why? Who asked for a prequel to The Omen? And I kind of forgot this movie was even really coming out, which is kind of sad because after watching it tonight, I have a lot to say about this movie. But I walked in just kind of like, all right, movie, do your best. Horror this year has been very muddy. I gotta be honest. Gotta be real honest about my favorite horror genre. And I walked out with a smile on my face. The First Omen shocked me in every way possible. The biggest thing I gotta say, Nell Tiger free. Now, I don't recognize her personally, but my mom does. She's apparently in the show The Servant, which is on Apple TV, and it's the M. Night Shyamalan show. I didn't watch it, my mom did, but Nell Tiger free. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. What a performance. She is electric. She carries this movie. She is tremendous in this movie. I was just in awe of her performance. The direction in this movie is freaking great. This movie's set in 1971. Obviously, it's a prequel of The Omen. This movie, even though it had great, amazing sound design and really good HD quality, the look of it looked like 1970s. The production design, the costume, yeah, it's 1970s, but the actual movie itself looked like a 1970s movie. The yellow, the bright lights, the darker scenes, it just had that grudgy feeling of a 1970s movie. And I gotta give it up to the director too. I don't recognize any of the stuff that this person's directed, but this really caught my eye, and I would love to see what they do next. The writers of this movie, again, no one's really standing out. One person wrote Firestarter, the remake, but this script was really engaging. Now, I am not a diehard fan of The Omen. I call it a classic. I've seen the movie. It's been a few years, so I went to this movie hoping not to be a prequel that you really need to rely on that first one. It sort of is, but there was enough in this movie that I feel like anyone could go watch this movie and not have seen The Omen. I think, honestly, watching this movie would make you want to go watch The Omen, because that's what it definitely made me want to do. But man, I was in the theater tonight, and this movie was disturbing in the best way possible. The score is so damn good. I know the classic Omen score is a classic, but this movie gives you a great score. It truly is haunting. And the imagery, I read somewhere on Twitter that this movie was going to be NC-17. I was like, really? A 20th Century Studios First Omen prequel movie is going to be NC-17? Watching this movie? I don't blame them. When the practical effects are shown, I am in awe. I'm like, this is disturbing shit. You are showing some crap that might really disturb some people, honestly. And I've seen a ton of horror movies, and there is a few images in this movie. I'm like, that's haunting. There is one shot, there's a couple, but there's one in particular for me that I'm like, oh, that's creepy. That's creepy. I just did not expect this movie to really get me like that. I just found this movie enthralling, the mystery of this movie, and to really explore what the church is doing. And I will say this, Immaculate just came out. There are very similar plot points, very similar. I'm kind of shocked they came out so close to each other, because the plotting in this movie reminded me of Immaculate. So I don't know who's going to sue who, but we're going to find out probably. But yeah, I was really enthralled in this movie. As a horror fan, I was just loving the scenery, the disturbance of it, and I just love this kind of stuff. And I'm not even a big horror religious guy. Like, those kind of movies aren't my go-to horror movies. This one kept me intrigued. Now, I wouldn't say this movie's perfect. My number one thing, there is a reveal in this movie. I don't want to spoil anything for this movie, but I will say the reveal is kind of predictable. Like, it's a reveal that, like, it does it really well. Like, it builds it up and it gives you a good mystery that you're enthralled in the story. But me personally, I was like, wouldn't it make sense if that plot point was this character? Turns out it is. So I was like, oh, okay, then I was right. So I was very like, this was very on the nose predictable, but it was still enthralling. Like, I was still into this movie. And once this reveal happens, the movie kind of goes at a fast pace. Like, it's like, oh, we've built this entire lore, and now that this reveal's happened, now this thing's happening right now. I'm like, what? I thought it was supposed to happen this and this and this, but this movie was like, oh, it's happening right now. I was like, okay, but the ending is great. The imagery and the darkness of this movie. This is not a happy horror movie at all, people. This is a dark movie, and I love seeing that, man. From a 20th Century Studios released movie. That is cool that we're getting this kind of movie with a big distributor. That's awesome to see. We're not just relying on A24 or Blumhouse. We get to see a big horror movie be put out and be this disturbing, and I got to applaud them that. Another thing about this ending, again, without spoiling it, but then again, you know it's a prequel to The Omen. This movie is setting up to watch The Omen, basically. It's basically saying, hey, after you're done with watching this movie, go home and watch this. Like, that's what it's basically doing. It's like setting up, doing Easter eggs, like, hey, here's The Omen stuff. But there's a whole plot point in this ending that leaves room for a sequel to this movie. Not just a sequel to just go into The Omen. No, there's like room for another story in this story. I'm like, are we going to explore that, or is this just going to be a prequel and now go watch The Omen? Because I'm like, there's stuff that kind of leaves you hanging. You're like, I kind of want to know what's going to happen, but are we getting a part 2? Like, I don't know. Like, it's like, hey, here's a prequel, now watch The Omen. There's no in-between. I want the in-between. There is stuff I want answered, honestly. But in the end, I will say that this movie just, it really made me smile. There are a few things that they take from the Omen. There's one death in particular that totally reminded me of a death in The Omen without spoiling anything. There's also a scene that I don't know if it felt like just a copy off, but like there's a scene that reminds me of the movie The Possession, 1981. There's a scene from The Possession, it's very famous. There's a scene in The First Omen that reminds me of The Possession in a good way, but I'm like, did y'all take that from Possession? Like, it reminded me of that. Anyways, I'm getting too deep into it. It's too long a review, but I just gotta say, The First Omen shocked me. I felt disturbed. I loved being disturbed. I loved looking at this movie. Sound design, the score, the acting. Nell Tiger is fucking awesome in this movie. I mean, everyone's great in this movie. The dad from The Witch. I mean, this is a good horror movie. My horror fans out there, especially if you're fans of The Omen, go and see it. I'm going to give The First Omen an A-. I feel like I should give it a B+, because again, the ending is a little bit like set up for The Omen, and there's questions that I don't know will get answered. And like I said, there's a few stuff, like, I don't know how much I'm going to rewatch this movie, because again, I'm not the biggest religious horror guy, but like, this one really enthralled me. So, I don't know, like, I feel like I would watch this again. I would want to see the NC-17 version, if they ever want to release that version. I definitely want to see what they do there. But yeah, go and see this, my horror fans. Honestly, this I'm really intrigued to see how other people react to this movie, because I almost love this movie, guys. Like, I really like this movie. This is a well-made horror movie. And you guys enjoy this movie review. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, everybody.